Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Don't you think you're a bit too old for that dress? Her husband teased as she was getting ready for the company party, leaving his disappointed wife at home. But when he returned, he was stunned. Marissa sat in the kitchen, crying. In front of her stood an open bottle of wine, clearly an expensive and refined drink, gifted to her by a friend on her birthday 6 months ago. But Marissa was never a fan of alcohol, which is why the bottle had remained untouched until tonight. Finally, it had come in handy. Marissa sighed deeply as she recalled her husband's eyes, full of contempt and hatred, and filled another glass. The wine was delicious, yet it didn't bring the relief she desired, but it did offer a pleasant warmth inside. Draped over the back of the chair was the very dress that had sparked the argument. Though, was it really about the dress? Diego had hurled accusations and insults with such fury, as if something had snapped inside him, as if he had been waiting for years to vent his frustrations. The dress was just an excuse, a piece of fabric that had seemed like a wonderful outfit just an hour ago, perfectly accentuating her figure. The dress had been bought for tonight's event, the anniversary celebration of the company where Diego was the head of the sales department. The celebration was set to be grand: restaurant, celebrity guests, fireworks. Marissa hadn't gone out in ages. Of course, outings with the grandchildren didn't count. She longed to feel beautiful and important again. Important as the wife of a big boss. She had imagined how wonderful the evening would be with her husband. Marissa had chosen the dress with her friend Pilar. They had known each other almost all their lives, since their first year at university. Pilar was smart and beautiful, always keeping up with fashion. So Marissa completely trusted her friend to help her pick the right outfit for the corporate event. Marissa herself had wanted something more modest. She liked classic options, maxi length, covered shoulders and elbows, calm colors. But her friend had a very different opinion. "Why are you always looking at those granny dresses?" Pilar had exclaimed. "You're not even 50 yet. By modern standards, you're still a young woman. It's practically your youth." "You're exaggerating," Marissa smiled. "I do have 2 grandchildren, after all." "Well, if you had Sergio so young, and he also became a father early, it doesn't mean anything. Who cares about grandkids? We're the same age, and I'm still the mother of a schoolboy, so." There was no convincing Pilar. She'd always been like this, bright, loud, assertive, cheerful, a walking celebration. Pilar made Marissa try on outfits she wouldn't have considered on her own: bold patterns, overly modern cuts. Yet, strangely, these clothes looked good on Marissa. They refreshed her, made her look younger. She spent a long time admiring herself in the mirrors, and her mood even lifted. Who would have thought she was still quite attractive? Not so much the granny after all. In the end, Marissa chose a bright turquoise dress. Pilar insisted that this color matched Marissa's eyes perfectly, and she was right. The dress was slightly below the knee, an unusual length for Marissa, with open shoulders and back, and a fitted top. "It looks amazing," her friend said approvingly. "Finally, you can show off your neckline. You were flat as a board in your youth, but now you're an impressive, striking woman." Marissa liked how the dress fit her too. It made her feel like someone else, not a housewife, not just her husband's wife, not the perfect mother, and certainly not a grandmother, but a beautiful, stylish woman. Marissa smiled at the thought of how Diego would react to her outfit. He'd surely be thrilled, and maybe, just maybe, that old admiration she hadn't seen in his eyes for so long would return. "We'll take it," she said decisively, looking at Pilar. "Good for you." "Perfect choice," her friend smiled. Marissa had purposely not shown the dress to her husband in advance. He hadn't been particularly interested, anyway. Recently, he had grown distant, indifferent. It hadn't happened overnight, gradually, quietly. Marissa knew she was partly to blame, having lost herself in the children, and then in the grandchildren. She had been so absorbed in maintaining their large home and garden, creating comfort for her family, trying to please everyone, that she had forgotten about herself and her husband. He was the breadwinner, the provider, she was the keeper of the hearth. Their roles had been set from the very beginning, and everyone seemed content with them. But sometimes Marissa deeply missed the days when she was more than just a caretaker to Diego, when she was his muse. Yes, that's what he had called her, showering her with exquisite compliments. His eyes used to light up when he looked at Marissa, and under that gaze, she had felt incredibly beautiful, loved, desired, and overwhelmingly happy. They had met as university students. Diego had simply approached a group of girls on the street, not shy, not hesitant. Marissa, Pilar, and two other girls had decided to take an evening stroll through the central streets of the city. They had just finished their exams and were in high spirits. Marissa had aced all her tests, so she was expecting a higher scholarship. Plus, there were still 2 whole months of summer and relaxation ahead. At that time, Diego was a true heartthrob, though he was still handsome now, back then. Tall, athletic, the captain of the university basketball team. A charming smile, blue eyes, Marissa had openly admired the young man when he approached the lively group and asked if he could join their walk. Pilar, the undisputed leader of the group, gave her consent, and Diego simply joined them. He joked, entertained the girls, told stories about the old buildings they passed by in the city center, asked them questions, and answered theirs honestly. It turned out that Diego was their peer, had just finished his exams too, and had 1 more year left at university. He was studying at a different institution, though the girls attended the Economics Institute, and Diego was studying at the Architectural Engineering University. Of course, Marissa had immediately realized that Diego had approached the group because of her. He made it clear with his every move. He stayed close to her, looked at her in a special way, and smiled at her more often than at the others. It was dizzying. He liked her, too. Her friends understood that out of all of them, Diego had chosen Marissa. They strolled through the night city for a long time, and when it was time to part ways, Diego asked for Marissa's phone number. That's how their beautiful romance began. Their dates were like something out of a movie: flowers, sweet words, gentle touches. He often told her that from the moment he first saw her, he knew she was his destiny. By the end of her final year, Marissa realized she was pregnant. Of course, they hadn't planned it. They wanted to finish their studies, then each secure a job, and only then think about marriage. It was Diego who spoke about the future wedding, confident that sooner or later, they would tie the knot. And now, this news. Marissa told him everything, fearing his reaction, but Diego smiled and pulled her into a tight embrace. She stood still in his warm arms and even cried, realizing she had worried for nothing. Everything would be fine. Well, it's not how I wanted to do this, but here we are. Marissa, will you marry me? He asked. She nodded in agreement, too overwhelmed to speak. They got married. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was definitely lively and fun. Lots of young guests, friends, relatives, everyone got along quickly. Together, they helped the newlyweds buy a small room. It was tiny but cozy, their own little nest. Marissa didn't go to work. Why would she, with maternity leave approaching and her pregnancy being difficult? She was hospitalized several times to avoid complications. She feared losing the baby and felt she wouldn't survive if that happened. Diego was always by her side, supporting and reassuring her. Sergio was born on time, a healthy, rosy-cheeked baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's long eyelashes. Diego and Marissa learned to be parents under the watchful but unobtrusive eyes of Sergio's grandmothers. It was a wonderful time. The apartment was small, but the happiness was immense. Diego would rush home from work to spend time with their son in the yard. While the boys were out, Marissa would prepare a delicious dinner, and afterward, the 3 of them would lie on the sofa watching a movie together. Marissa thought that once Sergio grew up, she would enroll him in kindergarten and return to work. After all, she had a degree and didn't want it to go to waste. Diego, a talented architect, was rising quickly in his career, which reflected in his salary. They had a solid bank account now. Marissa wanted to achieve something, too. She longed to work and had even started buying a new office wardrobe. Sergio was growing fast, and the energetic, sociable boy would surely enjoy kindergarten. They just had to wait for a spot to open up. Finally, the kindergarten director called and said they had a spot for Sergio. Marissa was overjoyed. She immediately posted her resume online, and job offers came quickly. Sergio started kindergarten, and Marissa went back to work. And that's when the difficulties began. Diego was staying late at the office, endless meetings, new projects, business trips. Marissa worked as an HR specialist in a small company until 6 p.m., then she had to pick up Sergio from daycare, play with him, cook dinner, and clean up. It was hard to balance everything, and she asked Diego for help, but he shrugged. "I can't help it, there's too much work. It's all for our future, don't you see? I'm almost ready to buy us a nice apartment. Plus, I'm about to get promoted, it'll mean a lot more money. I can't just drop everything to pick up Sergio from daycare." Marissa nodded in agreement. What could she say? Diego was right, his work was essential for their family's future, while hers seemed less serious. Her salary was small, after all. Then Sergio started getting sick. Marissa knew that it was common, many kids in daycare were often sick. Usually, grandparents would help in such situations, but both her and Diego's parents were still young and working. So Marissa had to take time off work. Her employer wasn't happy about it, and there was no talk of career development or promotions. She struggled to keep up with her current job, especially when Sergio would go to daycare for 2 weeks and then spend 3 weeks at home sick. Eventually, her boss suggested she resign. That night, she cried on Diego's shoulder, and he comforted her, criticizing her unsupportive boss, and then said, "Just quit and stay home with Sergio. I earn enough for both of us, and your peace of mind is more important to me." "But I want to work," Marissa sobbed. "Work isn't going anywhere. Sergio won't be little forever. In a year or two, you can go back to work, and by then, he won't get sick so often." So they decided it was best for everyone. Marissa quit her job and became a full-time homemaker. The house was always clean and filled with the smell of delicious food. A few years passed. Sergio started school, and the constant illnesses were behind them. The family now lived in a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in the city center. Diego drove a luxury SUV, and he bought Marissa a car as well. She got to choose the model she had long wanted. Everything seemed to be going well. Marissa was ready to resume her career. It was the perfect time, though the years off and lack of experience made her nervous. Diego reassured her that she would do great. After all, she was still young, and his words gave her confidence. Marissa found a job in her field. A rapidly growing company was looking for economists, and experience wasn't necessary. Marissa went to the interview, and they called her back the same day to say she got the job. They gave her a list of documents to submit to HR. Marissa needed to pass a medical examination, and she received the necessary paperwork. Early the next morning, she was at the hospital in high spirits, excited to start her career again. But in the gynecologist's office, she received a surprise. The doctor calmly informed her that she was pregnant. Marissa nearly fell off the chair in shock. 5 or 6 weeks along, the doctor repeated, seeing Marissa's stunned expression. "You didn't know?" "No, I had no idea." "Well, let's do an ultrasound to check everything, since you're here." The ultrasound shocked Marissa even more. Yes, she was pregnant, and the doctor had visualized not 1, but 2 embryos. Marissa was expecting twins. "Are you planning to carry to term?" the doctor asked, gazing at her indifferently. "Of course," Marissa replied, still in disbelief. Marissa left the office a changed person. Inside, a storm was raging. She couldn't believe how drastically her plans, and indeed her life, had changed in a single moment. Of course, work was now out of the question. Diego seemed almost happy about it. "This is amazing. Family is the most important thing in life, and now we're going to be parents of 3. I've always dreamed of this. I'll move mountains for you guys. Marissa smiled, pleased with his reaction, but she also wanted to move mountains. She wanted to work, to do more than just be a stay-at-home mom. But with 3 children, that dream would have to wait. Letitia and Aurora were born prematurely, as often happens with twins. They were fragile and sickly. Marissa barely remembered those first few years. Constant hospital visits, checkups, and rehabilitation programs. Diego provided everything they needed financially, but he couldn't help physically, as he was always working and, of course, tired. Those were tough years, both physically and emotionally. At least Marissa didn't have to worry about money. But one thing was clear, she no longer belonged to herself. Pilar, a close friend, was outraged by this fact. How can this be? You're a young and beautiful woman. How can you not love yourself like this? What's with your hair? You should have thought about your figure a long time ago, and your clothes. You're not an old lady. You have money, let's go shopping and pick out a new wardrobe for you. Marissa just sighed. Pilar worked, went on dates, and led a life straight out of a TV show, romances, socializing with friends, trips, and vacations. She couldn't understand Marissa, who had become a mother of many children just before turning 30. In fact, she and Pilar rarely talked anymore, much to Marissa's regret, because their interests and goals at this stage of life were just too different. But time passed, the girls grew up and became stronger. They didn't attend kindergarten due to frequent illnesses, but by the time they started school, those issues were left behind. Marissa still remembered the feeling of freedom when all the kids were at school and she had the house to herself for a few hours. It was fantastic. Still, Marissa didn't consider going back to work. There was too much to do with the kids, taking them to extracurricular activities, feeding them, going on walks, and helping all 3 with homework. Diego provided well for the family, they were not in need. And Marissa was a little scared to start anything new. After all, it had been almost 12 years since she graduated, and she still hadn't gained that necessary experience. Marissa looked at Pilar and felt a bit envious. Pilar had recently given birth to a son, and when the boy turned 2, she returned to work after maternity leave. She was advancing professionally, of course, she was tired, but she lived a full life and managed everything. I can't stay at home, admitted the energetic Pilar. The walls are closing in on me. And Mario, well, his grandmothers enjoy taking care of him, and he likes being at kindergarten. Diego supported his wife in her desire to remain a stay-at-home mom. He enjoyed the coziness and cleanliness, the well-raised and successful children, the delicious home-cooked dinners. Everyone was happy. And then Diego and Marissa fulfilled their long-held dream. They moved into their own home. Diego bought a cottage in an elite suburban neighborhood, complete with a garden. Marissa threw herself into arranging it with great enthusiasm. She enjoyed growing flowers, caring for the trees, and decorating the space. Gardening was her form of relaxation, her way to de-stress. It brought her true peace, and she felt calm and happy. Indeed, everything in her life was going well, even perfectly. A loving husband, wonderful children, a cozy home, everything one could ask for. As for the red diploma gathering dust on the shelf, Marissa tried not to think about it anymore. The years flew by, faster and faster. A day could feel long, but suddenly a month was over, then another. The children were growing up quickly, which was a bit disorienting. Not long ago, they were just little ones running around the house, and now they were tall teenagers. Sergio's voice had broken, and the girls' bodies had changed. Marissa always had a good relationship with all her children, so the teenage years went by relatively smoothly. However, it pained her a little that each of her children had suddenly developed their own lives, with friends, endless meetings, and constant texting. Sometimes, Marissa felt completely alone in the big house. It was time to reconnect with her husband. Somehow, without them realizing, they had drifted apart. They both had too much on their plates. Diego carried the responsibility of providing for their large family, and he handled it brilliantly. However, he had to work a lot. Constant business trips, late nights, sometimes even sleeping at the office. Meanwhile, Marissa was fully absorbed in caring for the children and their needs. Recently, Marissa and Diego's conversations had been limited to discussing the kids. They no longer talked about movies like they used to, didn't argue about random topics, and didn't go to the movies or restaurants. Sure, they occasionally went on family vacations, but even during those rare moments, Diego, although physically present, was still somewhat absent, texting or calling someone, lost in his own thoughts. It was obvious that he was just playing the role of a dutiful family man and a good father. Of course, Diego loved the kids, but he spent little time with them. That's just how it happened. As a result, he didn't have the same connection with them that Marissa did. And in general, for Diego, the children weren't the center of his life. They didn't block out the entire world like they did for Marissa. So, the kids grew up. Sergio had already graduated from university and even started his own family. At 44, Marissa became a grandmother, and her joy knew no bounds. She planned to help the young family raise their children, a grandson and, a year later, a granddaughter, but the young parents handled everything perfectly on their own. They made it look easy. Marissa didn't want to interfere in their idyll. Still, she sometimes took the kids out, whether to the theater, the amusement park, or just to visit her. Those days were holidays of happiness for her. Leticia and Aurora were in no hurry to start families yet. Understandably so, they were still young. Both daughters were attending university. The twins chose the same major, law. But each had her own passions. Leticia worked as a model. Tall, slim, and confident, she had always loved being the center of attention since childhood. She was doing quite well and was even making money. Her plans included conquering the capital first, and then, who knows, maybe the whole world. Leticia had always been ambitious. Naturally, Marissa worried about her daughter. The world of show business was full of dangers. On the other hand, Leticia had been pragmatic and cautious since childhood. If nothing else, she had a good head on her shoulders. Aurora, on the other hand, was passionate about music. As a teenager, she had mastered the piano, then the guitar, and later the drums. Now she was officially the lead singer of a local band. Aurora loved her craft. She enjoyed touring and performing on local stages and always spent a lot of time rehearsing. Marissa's daughters had turned out to be quite creative. She was glad they had hobbies and passions of their own. Marissa had never had anything like that in her life. And sometimes, it made her feel unfulfilled. Still, Marissa didn't share these feelings with even her closest friend, Pilar. She was afraid she wouldn't be understood because, well, it would seem as if she was just being ungrateful. She had lived her life in comfort, and yet here she was, feeling unsatisfied. Marissa kept busy with her garden, read a lot, and enjoyed meeting up with Pilar, whose life, as usual, was full of excitement. Pilar managed to juggle work, raising her son, breaking up and getting back together with various men, and still remained the best friend to her child's father. A unique personality. It's no surprise that it was Pilar whom Marissa asked to help her pick out an outfit for her husband's corporate party. This event meant a lot to Marissa. She and Diego hadn't been out together in so long. She longed for a celebration, a sense of unity, fun, chatting over a glass of champagne, hugs from her husband, his attention, finally. He invited her almost reluctantly. He just said, as he was leaving for work, that in a week his company would be celebrating its anniversary, and there was a grand event planned. Please, try to look decent, it's important to me. Marissa even let the clear hint that she usually doesn't look decent pass by. It's okay. They've been together for so long that they can afford to tell each other the truth. The news about the corporate party made Marissa happy, uplifted. She wanted to present herself to her husband and his colleagues as a beautiful, attractive woman. But after taking a good look at herself in the mirror, Marissa deflated. She hadn't paid much attention to her appearance in a while. And, as it turned out, there were plenty of issues. No, for the house, the family, and the garden, Marissa looked just fine. But to make an impression at a party, she clearly wasn't up to it. Marissa had always been tall and slim. Her daughters had inherited her figure, but with age, she had gained some extra weight. Nothing critical, but the fat on her hips and stomach wouldn't allow her to wear a tight dress. Her skin, well, it had a healthy color, of course. After all, the woman spent so much time outdoors, working in the garden. But the wrinkles. There weren't that many, but she no longer looked like a fresh, blooming girl. And should she? After all, she was nearing 50. In any case, Marissa turned to Pilar for help. And her friend was thrilled by the request. "We'll make you look so stunning, Diego will be floored, and all his colleagues, too." Marissa felt relieved. She wasn't facing her problems alone anymore. Pilar understood how important this corporate event was for her friend. It turned out that looking young and beautiful was a kind of work. Pilar took her friend to her cosmetologist. After a few painful, expensive express procedures, Marissa's skin transformed and looked much younger and fresher. "With your money, you could afford plastic surgery," Pilar said, openly admiring the results. "But it's too early for that. Still, you don't need to fear aging. Modern cosmetology and surgery work wonders." Marissa shrugged. She had never really feared aging. But, of course, it was nice to see her rejuvenated face in the mirror. It lifted her mood. And her self-esteem, too. Pilar dragged Marissa to the gym. "There are no miracles, of course. You won't lose noticeable weight in a week, but it's a start," Pilar said, watching Marissa struggle with an unfamiliar machine. Pilar herself found it easy, almost playful. She had been going to the fitness center for a long time. But for Marissa, every movement was hard, though it was pleasant to feel lightness in her body afterward. And finally, the dress. Marissa needed the right outfit for the corporate party. Of course, Pilar went shopping with her loyal friend. She couldn't leave Marissa at such an important moment. A seafoam-colored dress. Marissa hadn't even looked at it. The style seemed too youthful, and the color, she would have preferred something calmer. But Pilar insisted, and Marissa obediently tried it on in front of the mirror. Yes, it was, of course, unusual for her to wear something like that, but she also looked striking and fresh. The color of the dress highlighted her eyes and beautifully complemented her tan. The length, slightly above the knee, didn't seem so inappropriate. And, surprisingly, the snug fit disguised her problem areas, her stomach and hips. "A clever cut and a perfect design," Pilar remarked, looking at her friend with admiration. "It suits you so well. You look like you've dropped 10 years and 5 kilos at once." Marissa admired her reflection in the mirror. Yes, as always, Pilar was right. She had an eye for these things, no doubt. Marissa didn't show Diego the dress beforehand. She only told him that she was ready for his corporate event. He nodded absent-mindedly, continuing to type a message to someone. He wasn't interested at all. A bit disappointing, but it was okay. It would make it even more enjoyable to see his reaction at the party itself. Let it be a surprise. And so, the long-awaited evening arrived. That morning, Diego had told Marissa that she needed to be ready by 7. He would come home from work, change, and then they would head to the restaurant where the company's anniversary was being held. Marissa had been ready long before the appointed time. A makeup artist, recommended by Pilar, had done her makeup, and Marissa styled her hair herself the way she liked it. And finally, the finishing touch, the dress. With an open back, unusually short and bright. Marissa bought high-heeled shoes to match the festive outfit. High heels really do wonders, something Marissa had almost forgotten. Put on a pair, and you're practically a top model. Marissa looked at herself in the mirror as if she were someone else entirely. She was still beautiful, after all. And not old at all. Even though she was already a grandmother. Surely Diego would notice that tonight. And who knows, maybe this evening would mark the beginning of their reconnection, the start of a journey back to each other. The strong feelings they once had couldn't have disappeared entirely. The sound of a key turning in the door echoed. Marissa's heart raced like it did before a first date. She was a little nervous, but she still went downstairs to meet her husband. She so wanted to see that old admiration in his eyes. Marissa lightly ran down the stairs, forgetting she was in heels. It turned out that old habits don't die. Wearing heels was like riding a bike. Once you've learned, you never forget. Diego looked gloomy. He hadn't yet seen his transformed wife. And now, the moment of truth. Diego slowly raised his eyes to Marissa, who stood waiting for his reaction with a warm smile. "You. Why are you dressed like a clown?" Diego said coldly. He didn't look at Marissa with the expected admiration, but with contempt, dissatisfaction, almost hatred. "What?" Marissa didn't understand. "The dress is short, revealing, like it's for a young girl, and you. Have you even seen what you look like?" "I have," Marissa answered honestly. Her husband's reaction stunned her. Just recently in the mirror, she had seen not a young woman, but still a fairly youthful and beautiful one. "You look ridiculous." "Like a cow in a saddle," Diego continued angrily. "I asked you to buy something elegant, sophisticated, something appropriate for your age at least. This is a beautiful dress." "Maybe it is, but it doesn't suit you anymore." "Diego, what are you talking about? Look at yourself, what have you become? A housewife, fat and frumpy, and now you're trying to wear a young girl's dress." "Well, I'm not 18 anymore." Marissa's voice started trembling with the tears welling up. Diego's words were unexpected, cruel, sharp, each one causing unbearable pain. "How am I supposed to show up with you in front of decent people?" Diego demanded. "It's a disgrace. Everyone else's wives look like wives, but I've got a barrel in a frivolous blue dress." This was too much. Diego had never said anything like this before. He had been cold, distant, indifferent, yes. But never like this, accusatory, contemptuous, angry. Diego slammed the door and disappeared into the bedroom. Soon, the sound of running water came from the bathroom. He had gone to take a shower, apparently. Marissa, exhausted, sank down onto the couch. She didn't know what to do next. For some reason, she really wanted to take off that very dress that had so infuriated Diego. But how could she? What would she wear then? In any case, she no longer wanted to go to the party. Marissa didn't feel beautiful anymore. A barrel in a frivolous little blue dress. Maybe her husband was right. The outfit did look out of place on her. 10 minutes later, Diego came downstairs, already dressed for the corporate event. The new trousers and iron short-sleeved shirt fit him perfectly. He looked young, handsome, and fit. There was a gym at the office where Diego worked. Employees used it in their free time, and here was the result. By the way, it had been Diego's initiative to set up the gym, saying it was a necessity for people with desk jobs, not a luxury. Diego seemed calmer now, but he still cast a disdainful glance at the confused Marissa. "Your mascara's smudged," he remarked. Marissa rubbed her cheek, leaving a black streak on her hand. She must have been crying and hadn't even noticed. "Sorry," Diego said gruffly, "I overreacted, but so did you. Why dress up like that? Anyway, I'll go to the party alone. I'll tell everyone you're sick. You can't show up looking like this, it'd be embarrassing for me." Marissa nodded obediently. She had neither the strength nor the desire to go to the party anymore. She would have felt terribly out of place, thinking all the time that she looked like a barrel in that dress. Diego had a way with words, finding the most vivid and apt descriptions. He was good at that. Diego left the house in high spirits. Of course, he felt bad for hurting Marissa, but he could have been gentler. Then again, she could have been smarter, too, dressing up like that, in an inappropriate outfit. By the way, that dress actually suited her. In it, she looked like a quite attractive middle-aged woman. But that was the problem, middle-aged. Diego's colleagues had entirely different wives, young, slim girls who looked like models. Marissa wouldn't have fit in with them. Next to the youthful beauties, she would have looked like a grandmother. And Diego, head of a large department, didn't want to show up with such a companion. He just didn't want to, and he had every right. Image matters a lot. But there was another reason, of course. Diego had been looking forward to getting closer to Esperanza, the new HR employee, at the party. She looked like a young April witch, dark, wavy red hair falling below her shoulders, enchanting green eyes, sculpted cheekbones, plump lips, and golden freckles scattered across her face. Esperanza tried to cover the freckles with foundation, but they always peeked through, making her beautiful face even cuter and more alluring. Her graceful figure and elegant movements made it impossible to take your eyes off her. Diego tried not to think about the fact that this girl was the same age as his eldest son. So what? In Diego's circle, such an age difference was normal. Almost all the department heads and directors were either on their second or even third marriages with young beauties, or they had young mistresses. Diego understood them completely. His own wife, Marissa, who had once seemed like the ideal, years ago, she had been witty, caring, and understanding, had turned into something unrecognizable. She had enough money, Diego never denied her that, but she spent it on the garden, the house, the children, and grandchildren, rarely buying anything for herself. She didn't exercise, didn't go to a cosmetologist, even though with her natural features and the money, she could have looked much better. Marissa had let herself go, turning into a homely woman who irritated Diego just by her appearance. She seemed to remind him of his own aging. Diego was an aesthete, always attracted to beauty, including, of course, beautiful young women. He had had affairs and flings on the side multiple times. Marissa had no idea. It was easy to hide it from her. Work, business trips, late nights at the office, she believed it all. Did Diego feel guilty? No, and again, no. Because, well, Marissa was to blame herself. And really, she had no right to be upset. She had spent her whole life on his shoulders, never denying herself anything, never worrying about money. She could have thought about her husband, been more attentive to him. She could have taken care of herself, for heaven's sake, to look more presentable. And now, this corporate event. Esperanza had looked at Diego so suggestively, hinting that she had bought some knockout dress and beautiful lingerie for the party. She had said it outright. It wasn't just a hint, it was practically a direct proposition. Naturally, Diego couldn't remain indifferent to such a statement. Sparks had been flying between him and Esperanza for a while. The girl seemed to be tempting him, yet acting like an unattainable beauty, and now, suddenly, an open, unambiguous declaration. Very promising words, indeed. But Marissa would be with him. Thoughts of his wife felt like a cold shower to Diego. With Marissa there, Esperanza wouldn't even glance at him. She'd demonstratively dance with someone else, and Diego would only have jealousy left to watch. And frankly, he didn't want to show up with that kind of wife on his arm. His colleagues would bring their model-like wives, who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. And he, the head of a large department, a respected man in the company, would show up with his dowdy wife. Shameful. The day before the party, Diego made up his mind he wouldn't take Marissa. He'd come up with something. Marissa had been carefully preparing for the event, picking out an outfit, thinking about her makeup. She was set on attending the company's anniversary. Marissa wouldn't give it up easily, so Diego needed a really solid excuse to leave her behind. Diego spent the whole day pondering this issue. At the office, on the way home, nothing came to him. He walked into the house in a gloomy mood, and then Marissa came running down the stairs in a dress that, while youthful and refreshing, looked somewhat ridiculous and out of place. It wasn't right for the corporate event. All the other women would be in elegant dark dresses. Marissa's outfit wasn't suitable for such an occasion. And there it was, the excuse. Diego clung to it like a drowning man to a lifeline. Suddenly, he felt a surge of anger toward his wife, and all the pent-up irritation came pouring out in an accusatory speech. Diego didn't hold back. He hoped Marissa would get offended and decide not to go to the party herself. But she just looked frightened and confused, and Diego didn't get the rejection he'd been hoping for. He had to say it outright himself. It came out sounding quite believable. And, of course, there was truth in his words. Diego really was ashamed to be seen with Marissa at the party, but it wasn't about the dress. It was because Marissa was too old, too overweight, too unrefined. In the end, Marissa stayed home, and Diego, just as he had wanted, went to the party alone. Colleagues asked Diego about his wife. He would respond that they were in the process of getting a divorce, which is why they were never seen together. In truth, however, Diego had never seriously considered a divorce. Yes, Marissa was a homebody, but she was comfortable to be around, calm and peaceful. This arrangement suited Diego just fine. Let her stay, but it was better for her to stay busy with her own affairs and not bother him. Of course, that evening, Esperanza danced with Diego. She was simply enchanting, almost unreal in her beauty. Diego watched her, admired her, and was glad Marissa wasn't there with him. Naturally, after the party, they went to Diego's place. Not the family home, of course. He had a corporate apartment provided by his company. He didn't really need it, but who could turn down such an offer? Occasionally, he would bring his young, beautiful lovers here. The apartment had everything for a pleasant stay: a bar, a wall-sized TV, and even a jacuzzi. Diego felt happy and young again. In this apartment, with such a stunning red-headed girl. How lucky everything turned out. If Marissa had been with him, none of this would have happened. Esperanza would probably have left with the young programmer who had been pursuing her for a while. No way, boy, first grow up to the level of women like her, Diego thought. In the morning, Diego went to work, but in the evening, he had to go home, though he didn't really want to. First, he would have to apologize to Marissa, which he hated, but he really had said too much. Second, he'd be back in that suffocating home atmosphere when what he really wanted was to party, to take Esperanza somewhere, maybe a club or even to the sea. But instead, he'd have to face Marissa's sour expression. Apologizing felt unpleasant. It wasn't that Diego felt all that guilty, he just wanted things to go back to normal, his wife engrossed in her home and garden, looking at him like some kind of god, grateful for the financial stability he provided, their strong family intact. The house greeted Diego with silence. Marissa didn't come to greet him as usual. She must be really upset, he thought. Well, she has every right to be. No matter, though. I'll apologize and transfer a nice sum to her account. Diego knew how to smooth things over. But Marissa wasn't there at all. She wasn't in the bedroom, the garden, or the home gym. She had left. But in the kitchen, he found a note, written in her elegant handwriting. Diego brought the piece of paper close to his eyes and scanned the lines. Diego, I understand everything now. Your speech yesterday opened my eyes. I thought we could still restore the love and closeness between us, but no. We've both changed, you and I. Maybe no one's to blame, it just happened. I know who you spent the night with. I know it was a beautiful young girl with red hair. I went to the restaurant yesterday evening after all. Don't worry, I didn't intend to ruin your evening. I just wanted to warn you that I was leaving, to tell you in person. I saw you both getting into a taxi, your looks, words, gestures. It was obvious. And in truth, you have the right. But I also have the right to leave. I can't accept this. I'll file for divorce myself. The kids are grown, it will be quick. I don't want any of the assets. I've always known that everything was arranged in such a way that I couldn't claim anything in the divorce. I understood that all along but didn't care because I never thought about divorce. I trusted you more than anyone. Well, now, goodbye. Diego placed the note on the table, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. On the one hand, he was now officially free, and that was a good thing. The house was all his, he could invite anyone he wanted and arrange it to his liking. But on the other hand, his chest tightened. His feelings for Marissa, it seemed, hadn't entirely faded or disappeared. This person still mattered to him. Memories from their youth flooded back, when they understood each other without words, supported and protected each other. She was the one who had lifted him up in difficult times, given him hope, reassured him that everything would be okay. Then his phone rang. It was Esperanza. Diego felt a wave of warmth wash over him. "I already miss you," came the bright, young voice on the line. Diego pictured her, and a shiver ran down his spine. "I miss you too, baby. Come over. We'll pick out a seaside vacation together. I want to show you some breathtakingly beautiful places." "Oh, come over to yours? What about your wife?" "I told you, we've been strangers for a long time. We're in the process of getting a divorce." "So it's true? I thought it was just the usual excuse from a married guy." "Oh no, I'm being completely honest with you." After Diego left for the corporate event, Marissa had immediately pulled off her turquoise dress. Not long ago, it had seemed beautiful to her, but now it only disgusted her. Though, in truth, the dress wasn't to blame, and Marissa understood that perfectly. This had all started long ago, very long ago. The kids were still small then. At first, there was just a slight chill between her and Diego. Each of them gradually submerged into their own lives, their own worlds. Attempts to reconnect didn't lead to anything. And now, Diego's outburst. Marissa couldn't call it anything but hysterics. He had yelled at her, said hurtful things. But even more hurtful were his eyes. They were filled with disdain, with disgust. That's how he truly felt about her. She was revolting to him. At first, Marissa had dealt with her fears and thoughts on her own. But eventually, she couldn't take it anymore and called Pilar. She cried over the phone and spilled everything. At first, Pilar didn't understand what was happening. She was really scared. But Marissa pulled herself together and explained everything to her friend. Pilar immediately said she'd come over, and she arrived in less than half an hour. The friend sat in the kitchen for a long time, discussing the situation over a glass of wine, figuring out what to do next. They recalled things, even laughed. Marissa was glad she had called Pilar. With her, the situation didn't seem so terrible. "I've never told you this before, I didn't want to interfere in your relationship, but Diego, he really has been treating you like a commodity. And for a long time now. It's very obvious from the outside," Pilar admitted. "Of course, he's so successful, fit and handsome, wealthy. He probably has a mistress, not just one either. I have a sharp eye for these things." "You think so?" Marissa looked at her friend in surprise. A few days ago, she never would have believed such a suggestion. But now? "Well, I can't say for certain," Pilar shook her head. "I've never caught him red-handed, as they say, but the signs are all there. They caught him that same evening when, fueled by wine, they decided to go to the restaurant. Marissa had intended to tell Diego she was leaving him. The decision had formed spontaneously. It was a kind of prank. Marissa and Pilar had decided to scare Diego, give him time to reflect, let him think about his attitude toward his wife. Let him realize how much he would miss her, how dear she was to him. It was bound to be hard for him in that big house, all alone, without the home-cooked meals and lovingly prepared breakfasts that Marissa had always made for him. After all, Diego was used to the comfort of family life. According to her friend's plan, Diego was supposed to realize everything, reflect on it, and change his attitude toward his wife. Then Marissa would have certainly returned, and they would have lived happily and comfortably once again. However, near the restaurant, her shocked friends witnessed an interesting scene. Diego, hugging a young and beautiful girl, was getting into a taxi. They kissed periodically. "Well," Pilar said when the taxi sped away, "it's good that we caught them. Now you know everything." Marissa nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. She realized that this was something she could never forgive her husband for. Marissa went to stay with Pilar. Pilar, who lived with her son in a spacious 3-room apartment, offered her the living room. "Make yourself at home." In the morning, Marissa returned home to collect her things and documents. She realized her husband hadn't been there yet. It was obvious he had spent the night with that red-haired beauty at some hotel. She wondered how he planned to explain himself to her, his legal wife. He would probably say something about urgent work matters, how he had to go straight from the company event to the office to handle some issues. That had happened often before. But now Marissa knew her husband's stories about his stressful work weren't always true. Often, they were just a cover for his meetings with his mistress. Marissa didn't know what lay ahead. The future seemed foggy. She understood it would be hard, but it was still better than living with a liar and a traitor who didn't respect her. And Pilar had promised to help, to support her. "No woman has ever been lost without a man," Pilar had declared. Pilar was, of course, outraged that after the divorce, Marissa would get nothing. When she found out that all the property was registered under Diego's relatives, she became furious. What a sly fox! He planned it all along. "And why didn't you say anything? How did you let this happen?" "He said it was for tax reasons. I didn't think anything of it." "Well, you should have. You trusted him too much." Marissa sighed. Yes, she had trusted Diego more than herself. And, as it turned out, that was a mistake. Diego returned from his oceanfront vacation alone, disheveled, upset, and confused. The red-haired beauty, Esperanza, had made quite an impression at the luxury resort. At first, Diego was happy about it, even proud. What a beauty, turning heads wherever she went. But somehow, without realizing how it happened, Esperanza switched her attention from him to a young, handsome, and very wealthy German businessman. Gold-digging witch! Diego shouted in farewell to the delighted Esperanza. But his words didn't affect her at all. She just smiled her dazzling smile and replied, "Yes, maybe. But admit it, it's a profitable deal." Diego couldn't argue with that. The house greeted him with silence and emptiness. He ordered food from the restaurant and pulled a bottle of rum from the bar. He finished it in solitude, drinking to the point of forgetting himself. His soul felt too heavy. However, his morning didn't last long. After Esperanza came Lucia. Diego met her at a club, a dark-skinned, black-eyed brunette, vibrant, slim, and fun. They started living together almost immediately. Diego enjoyed having a young beauty at home. Her sight in tiny shorts lifted his spirits, but the house gradually fell into disrepair. Dust gathered in the corners, and the pots in the kitchen remained untouched. Lucia did nothing around the house. And that's where the arguments began. Diego demanded at least some basic comfort at home, while Lucia yelled back that she wasn't hired to be his maid. Eventually, she left too. Diego sighed with relief. The young beauty had already begun to annoy him. There were more girls after her. Beautiful, young, but all too flighty, shallow, and foolish. Then Diego met Sofia. She was older than his previous girlfriends, but at almost 30, she looked stunning. A great figure, velvet gray eyes, long hair the color of milk chocolate. With Sofia, he had things to talk about. She worked a lot, but still found time to cook delicious dinners. When she couldn't, she made sure to order food from a restaurant. Diego relaxed and felt almost happy. It seemed he had found the perfect combination of qualities, beautiful, smart, and capable around the house. Sofia was simply ideal. They lived together for about 3 months when Sofia brought up children. Diego hadn't seen that coming. He had no desire to raise kids again. Snotty noses, crying, sleepless nights, toys and crumbs all over the house, and Sofia would start to turn into a frumpy mom, just like Marissa once did. No thanks. In the end, Diego and Sofia talked and realized they had completely different plans for life. Sofia packed her things and left, thanking Diego for his honesty. She really wanted children, so being with Diego wasn't an option for her. Diego threw himself into work. Casual relationships no longer brought him joy. The empty, enormous house felt intimidating, suffocating in its silence. The loneliness was sharper at home. That's why Diego preferred to stay at the corporate apartment. His relationship with the kids hadn't worked out. They had always been closer to their mother, and now, after the divorce, the girls were completely estranged from their father. They had every right to be, of course. He had treated Marissa terribly, leaving her without money. Sergio, the eldest son, sometimes answered his father's calls. It was from him that Diego learned what had happened in Marissa's life. And he realized that the reconciliation he had hoped for was no longer possible. Marissa didn't stay with Pilar for long. Soon, she found a job and was able to rent her own apartment. Marissa was hired at the company in the lowest position. She didn't expect more, given her lack of experience. Starting from scratch at her age was hard, but in the end, everything turned out remarkably well. The new employee quickly proved herself to be hardworking, eager to learn, and responsible. Within 2 years, Marissa became the head of the department, a dizzying career ascent. Marissa loved her job. She had long dreamed of being in demand, of being important. She felt truly happy. She continued going to the gym with Pilar, which greatly benefited her health and figure. She became a regular at the beautician's, changed her style, and learned how to apply light makeup that emphasized her features and concealed minor flaws. She made new friends, with whom she now happily spent her time. Marissa missed her garden a little, so in the end, she set up a greenhouse right on her balcony. Her daughters helped her, and everything turned out perfectly. Then, one day, he came to their office on some work-related matter, Mario. Marissa helped him find the way to the office of the department head, and that's how they met. At first, Marissa thought she was imagining it. It was just her imagination that Mario was looking at her with admiration and interest and trying to flirt. But could that really be possible at her age? Men like young beauties, as Diego had recently demonstrated. But when Mario directly asked for her phone number after showering her with compliments, all doubts disappeared. It turned out that she and Mario had mirror-like stories. He was also divorced because his wife had cheated on him while he worked. He left the family, taking only his toothbrush with him. His children took his side. They were already grown and independent. The more Marissa got to know Mario, the clearer it became he was her perfect match. They felt at ease and fascinated by each other, not wanting to part for a moment. So, they quickly moved in together and eventually made their relationship official. Pilar was happy for her friend. "You've blossomed with him, you've become younger, you're glowing from within. This is real happiness for a woman. And it's all thanks to the dress," Marissa smiled, "that very one. It may have been turquoise, but it played the role of a red cloth for a bull." "I don't know," her friend disagreed. "I think it was bound to happen. If not the dress, something else would have been the reason." Still, Marissa was grateful to that dress. By the way, it now held an honored place in her wardrobe. Sometimes Marissa would wear it on walks with Mario, and Mario would always marvel at how the color of the dress accentuated the shade of his beloved woman's eyes.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.